At the start of the story, we see some NASA astronauts on a mission to Mars. They're all out there collecting soil samples. Suddenly, they get a warning that a massive storm is heading their way, so they have to cancel the mission and get back to their flying vehicle as fast as possible. Everyone starts rushing toward it. Meanwhile, Mark Watney, who's an astronaut and a botanist, gets hit by something and ends up getting lost in the storm. Although the commander tries really hard to find him, but there's no sign of Mark and no way to contact him. They start to think that Mark Watney might not be alive anymore. So they all get on their flying object and leave. But when the storm clears, they see that Mark Watney is still alive. One of his own tools, a rod, has pierced into his body, right through his stomach, causing him a lot of pain. Somehow he manages to get up and make his way back to the camp they set up. He had set up a shelter there, went inside it, and used his body to clear the path. Mark Watney can't contact anyone from here because all the communication equipment got destroyed in the storm. Now Watney is stuck here alone, and his team thinks he's no longer alive. If he wants to get out of here, he'll have to wait 4 more years, since NASA's next mission will arrive 3,200 kilometers away after 4 years, and he'll have to reach that spot. But Watney can't wait for 4 years because he doesn't have enough food to last that long, so now he has to find a way to get food for himself. That's why he decides to farm here on Mars. He has potatoes and wants to grow them here. But to make the soil fertile, he'll need a lot of water, and there's no water on Mars. Since Watney is a botanist, he knows exactly what's needed for farming, so he starts preparing to farm here. Watney gathers a lot of soil, he plants potatoes in it and grows them, and now it needs to make water. But the good news is that Watney knows how to make water. By mixing hydrogen and oxygen and then burning it, you get water. Here, Watney has all the resources and does just that. But the first time it mixes hydrogen and oxygen, there's a big blast because it didn't account for the oxygen coming from its breath. But next time, it mixes hydrogen and oxygen and burns it. He succeeds, and water starts forming there. Basically, evaporation occurs in such a way that tiny droplets of water begin to form, providing the soil with just the right amount of moisture it needs. After a few days, the first plant sprouts, and seeing that makes Watney really happy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, it's announced that Watney is no longer in this world. The news spreads all over the media, and they even hold a funeral for him. But the next day, when their operators check the satellite pictures of Mars, when she looks, she sees that their equipment has been moved from one place to another. Actually, these were the solar panels that Watney had shifted around, and she calls her seniors over. They all realize that Watney is still alive on Mars, but her senior says, "We know he's alive, but by the time we get there, he'll starve to death." And he's kind of right, because it would take them months to travel from Earth to Mars, and they know that Watney doesn't have enough food for that long. It's been 70 days on Mars, and Watney is calculating that NASA's next mission to land on Mars will be in 4 years, about 3,200 kilometers away from here. Then he'll have to get there, which will take around 50 days because his rover can only travel about 35 kilometers a day before he needs to recharge the solar panels. Meanwhile, back at NASA, people are preparing to send food and help to Watney, but it'll take them 3 months to get everything ready, and the flying object they send to Mars will take 9 months to reach there, so a whole year in total. Also, it's been 48 days since Watney's potato crop on Mars. He grew 400 plants, which turned out even better than he expected. He grows them properly, then digs up the potatoes and replants the smaller ones. Watney uses his waste as fertilizer here, but he knows that if he doesn't contact NASA no matter how many potatoes he grows, he won't survive. That's why he goes to a place where there's a pathfinder that broke down in 1997 and lost contact with Earth. When Watney heads that way, NASA's team down below, who have been tracking his movements through satellites, realize that Mark Watney is going to pick it up because there's nothing else there. But it's a pretty old system and can only send photos from Mars. So Watney puts 3 boards in front of the camera. The middle board says, "Can you see my signal?" The left board says yes, and the right board says no. NASA's team moves the Pathfinder camera toward the yes board, and Watney realizes they're looking at him, which makes him really happy. Later, Watney uses the course to talk to them, and now they can message each other. NASA sends him a message saying they're sending food and essential supplies for him. Watney also finds out here that NASA hasn't told his crew yet that he's still alive, and that the crew member who was with him is still in space, heading toward Earth. But he tells his entire crew that Watney is alive. This makes his crew members both happy and sad. They're sad because they care about Watney. He was left all alone there, but now there's nothing he can do. Everything was going smoothly on Mars. Then one day, at the spot where he had grown potatoes, there was an explosion and all his crops got ruined. Now he can't grow crops again because the atmosphere he had created there got completely destroyed. They figured out that with the potatoes he has, he won't be able to survive until help arrives from Earth. In other words, until help gets to him from Earth, by then he'll be dead from hunger. That's why NASA sends a message to Watney, telling him he needs to eat less from now on so he can survive until help and food get to him. Watney follows this and stretches what used to be his one day's food, which he ate 3 times a day, to last 3 days. Meanwhile, NASA is preparing a launch for him with food and essential supplies, but they're running late, so they skip testing and send him off anyway. But Watney's luck doesn't favor him this time either. After the launch, the rocket explodes in the sky, and everyone gets disappointed because Watney can't survive now. He has no food, no way to get help. When Watney finds out the launch failed, he breaks down and sends a message to NASA. It says, "Make sure this message reaches my parents. I'm not giving up, but we have to be ready for every outcome. Tell them I love my work, and I'm good at it too. Even if I die doing this, my death will have a purpose bigger than me. Tell them I'm not afraid of challenges. I face them head on." Meanwhile, NASA has completely lost hope. But China decides to help NASA because they're fully prepared for space missions. Now, with China's support, NASA gets ready to launch again in 28 days. Right then, there's a guy named Rich who works in astrodynamics. Rich tells NASA's team a way to contact Watney. He says that the rest of the crew on the spaceship is coming back to Earth. If they don't come back and instead orbit around Earth, we'll send all the necessary supplies up to the spaceship from here. Using a slingshot maneuver, we'll then push that spaceship carrying your 5 astronauts back towards Mars. A slingshot is a gravitational pull technique used to send any ship in space in a certain direction by using gravity. Rich says that when their ship reaches near Mars, they won't be landing on Mars. The thing is, if they land on Mars, they'll run out of fuel and won't be able to get back to Earth. He tells them they shouldn't land on Mars, but instead, the Watney MVE, a flying object that's already on Mars, needs to come out of Mars orbit. Once it's up there, the rest of the crew can catch it. But it's not that simple. NASA can't risk the lives of 5 astronauts just to save Watney. And if they did, they'd get to him too early. But the other crew members who are about to reach home will have their mission extended by 533 days, and NASA has decided not to do it because they can't risk the lives of the 5 astronauts just to save Watney, whose chances of survival were already very slim. Meanwhile, on Mars, Watney gets down to finishing the job he came there for, which was left incomplete because of the storm. On the other hand, the same guy who came up with the plan to bring Watney back is somehow working on a complete plan to reach him. He takes it up to 5 astronauts, and these 5 decide to bring Watney back without NASA's permission. When NASA sees their flying object changing direction, they realize the 5 astronauts are heading back to pick up Watney. NASA sends them all the supplies they need. China helps them out with this. Meanwhile, on Mars, Watney sets out to reach that flying object. He'll board it to leave Mars orbit and get to the spaceship called Hermes. Watney's 5 astronaut friends are coming to pick him up. After a long 90-day journey, Watney finally reaches the spot where he can leave Mars. But it's not that easy because the flying object is really heavy. So Watney has to take out almost all its parts. If the weight isn't reduced, Watney won't be able to reach space, and if the flying object the 5 astronauts are coming in lands on Mars, they'll run out of fuel and won't be able to get back to Earth. So Watney has to reduce the weight of his flying object by 5,000 kilos and unload all the stuff from it by throwing everything out. Now, Watney is going to fly into space with a flying object that's really hard to reach space with, but he has no choice. The whole world is watching this mission, and his flying object starts heading towards space and finally reaches it. People try to communicate with him via radio, but he faints because of the pressure. That's why they can't talk. But after a while, he regains consciousness, and everyone's really happy. Now, there's another problem. Watney moves very fast, and it's not easy to catch it. Watney says he'll poke a hole in his spacesuit and use the escaping air to steer himself toward you. His friends try to stop him from doing that. Meanwhile, the spaceship's speed is still really high, so they have to blow up part of their spaceship like a bomb to slow down, and that's when they see Watney coming toward him. The spaceship commander rides a flying chair to catch Watney, but the rope she's tied with runs out, making it impossible to reach him now. So Watney does exactly what he said he would. He punctures his spacesuit and lets go of his flying device. The air escaping from his suit guides him, and somehow he makes it back to his commander, who's waiting there on the same chair to pick him up. But just as he's about to grab her hand, she slips away. However, the rope she's tied to is grabbed by Watney, and that's how they manage to pull Watney back into his spaceship, saving his life. After facing so many hardships, when Watney finally lands on Earth, he becomes an instructor for the astronauts, teaching them how to survive on other planets and in different worlds. And that's how the movie ends with this scene.